How a narcissistic abuser targets your fun. Do you find yourself making excuses not to do things that you know you'll enjoy? Does anything that's not work or school related feel like something you shouldn't be doing? Is it strange to see depictions of people in the movies or TV having fun? Like, how is it that they're permitted to be so happy? And is it hard to enjoy activities that don't yield a sense of accomplishment? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions, then I hope today's video can be helpful. And non sequitur alert, I want to first talk about a song that came out in the late 80s when I was in 4th grade called Fight for Your Right to Party by the Beastie Boys. And if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend it. It's a great song. But when I was in 4th grade, what struck me about it was just how brazenly the Beastie Boys were championing their right to have fun in the song. Now, I grew up in a home that's a lot like the ones I talk about on this channel. So the notion of putting one's right to have fun squarely in the center of your life and doing everything in your power to protect it, or fight for it as it were, was pretty foreign to me, but incredibly appealing. And if you suffered narcissistic abuse by a parent or a partner, I think it's no accident why having fun and prioritizing it in your life can feel like a foreign and even dangerous concept. Or perhaps that it's fine for others, but just not for you. Well, in today's video, I want to discuss why fun is often an endangered species for the survivor of narcissistic abuse, and how you can work to get to know you deserve it and learn incrementally that it's now safe to experience in your process of recovery. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in San Francisco, California, and I specialize in working with individuals recover from narcissistic abuse by a parent or a partner. And whether it's through individual therapy and or my online course and accompanying online community, we take a 3-step approach to recovery. First is making sense of what happened. Next is gaining distance from the narcissistic abuser. And third is defying the narcissist's rules for living. Today's video falls under the category of living in defiance of the narcissist's rules for living. And if you're interested in another resource on how you can live in defiance of the narcissist's rules, you might check out my free webinar on 7 self-care tools to recover from narcissistic abuse. You can find the link in the description below or click here to watch it. So why was it dangerous to have fun around your narcissistic abuser? Well, psychologically speaking, a narcissist suffers from a core sense of worthlessness which they cannot bear to acknowledge and must relocate it into others. And it's usually directed towards someone else over whom they have authority. This makes the narcissist's child or partner a common target. In essence, the narcissist needs to find the child or partner as the worthless one instead of themselves. And they do this by acting in ways that pressure that child or partner, whom I'll call the scapegoat in this situation, to identify with the narcissist's cast off feelings of worthlessness. This lets the narcissist continue to deny what they can't tolerate about themselves and feel temporarily convinced that it's the scapegoat who's the worthless one. And an important piece to relocating the narcissist's own worthlessness into the scapegoat is that that scapegoat appears to be living a grim and colorless life. Because doing so for the scapegoat reinforces the narcissistic abuser's conviction that the scapegoated victim doesn't deserve any better than the treatment that the narcissistic abuser is giving them. And when the scapegoat is walking around with sort of this furrowed brow and a dour demeanor about them, that helps the narcissistic abuser function with a more intact, brittle as it is, sense of self. So the narcissistic abuser invests a lot in the scapegoated victim seeming to be in misery. So what happens if the scapegoat dares to have fun and or shows signs of life or color in their demeanor? Well, this can totally upend and disrupt the narcissistic abuser's fragile handle on their artificially inflated sense of self-worth. To see a scapegoated victim smiling due to a source of happiness that's unrelated to the narcissistic abuser can send messages to the narcissist that the scapegoated child or partner thinks they deserve better in their lives, thinks that their happiness is actually worth something, and they have found and are enjoying sources of happiness outside of the narcissist. All of these messages can feel profoundly threatening to the narcissist. And how will the narcissistic abuser cope? Well, as the saying goes, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And a narcissist responds to threats to his or her self-esteem by trying to devalue and even destroy the threat. And it's for this reason that survivors of narcissistic abuse often recall the worst attacks happening when it was evident that they were having fun in their lives. One recollection included being picked up from a party in one's teenage years along with a few friends by the narcissistic parent. And in the course of the car ride home, the survivor was laughing with their friends and making jokes with one another. Well, once the last friend got out of the car to go home, the narcissistic parent started yelling and screaming at the survivor for not having done some sort of chore at home, and then it led on to having said something disrespectful on the car ride. And in other instances, survivors recall coming home 1 or so minutes late after going to meet friends or, say, going to a school dance and getting met with an avalanche of yelling criticism and punishment. And sometimes the repercussions and situations were a lot worse than that. But the common thread through all these kinds of situations is that the survivor knew that there was something else afoot. That the problem wasn't that they forgot to do a chore or that they came home a minute late or that they said something disrespectful. The problem was that they were showing they were happy for a reason that was unrelated to the narcissistic abuser, and that was unacceptable to the narcissistic parent or partner due to the threat to that person's very fragile sense of self-cohesion that the survivor's happiness posed for that person. So in such a terrible, really, dilemma for the survivor, they often have to learn to wean themselves off of fun. It's just too dangerous. One way to do this is to adopt an attitude that having fun is immoral or bad in one way or another, that only accomplishment is worthy of one's efforts. But I think the primary purpose of adopting such an attitude is that it yields a sort of grim, stoic way of being. You know, if life doesn't include any opportunities for fun, then you're probably going to feel and reflect a kind of attitude of dourness or having a furrowed brow most of the time. I mean, you can try it at home. It's hard to smile when the brow is furrowed. But a furrowed brow is associated with working hard all the time. And that's the mode one can find oneself to avoid the danger of the narcissist's wrath by overtly having fun, is being in work mode at all times. Now, this stands in contrast to how in Snow White, the 7 dwarves would go to work, singing "Hi-ho, it's off to work we go," with big, huge smiles on their faces. It's a lot more like Cinderella, before her foot fits in the glass slipper. She's having to clean the floors and sweep them and clean everything at the beck and call of her stepmother or mother and stepsisters, and she's having no fun in her life, very much by design, by the evil mother and stepsisters. And similarly in Cinderella, you see how much more contemptuous and cruel her mother grew when something good happened in front of her to Cinderella, her foot fitting in the glass slipper, and how threatening the mother found Cinderella's happiness to be. Boy, there's a lot of wisdom in these fairy tales when it comes to understanding narcissistic abuse. Well, with this understanding in hand of why it feels dangerous to have fun around your narcissistic abuser, what can one do to make it feel safe again? Or, in essence, to get to fight for one's right to have fun or party, as it were? Like all strategies in recovery, it's essential first to have enough protective distance between yourself and the narcissistic abuser, so that experimenting with these strategies doesn't make you vulnerable to further attack by the narcissistic abuser. But assuming this distance is in place, it can become possible to notice how you might be avoiding the experience of having fun today. You may notice feeling anxious or ill at ease when in unstructured settings with friends or partner, or structuring your time so that you're always in the process of going after some goal. If that type of approach to life or experience in it resonates, then it can be useful to prescribe yourself activities designed for no other purpose than to have fun, like watching a sunset or a sunrise, or taking a directionless long walk, or having a long lunch or meal with a friend or a partner. And the idea is not that you find these activities fun right away, but that with continued inclusion of them in your day-to-day experience, you might get more and more reacquainted with the experience of fun and its value in your life. And of course, a big part of that is learning that it's safe to experience fun, that it's not going to come with the punishment that it used to. Now, one important note about fighting for your right to have fun in the process of recovery from narcissistic abuse is that fun is an incredibly innocent experience, and I think it connects us to our basic humanity. So engaging in activities just because they bring you a measure of joy can bring into stark contrast how your humanity was denigrated by the narcissistic abuser. It can bring home to you that at your core, you're a very good and decent individual, and that all the ways your narcissistic abuser pressured you to think and understand yourself were never true, that there's never been anything sinister about you. That experience of feeling sinister and having fun in this way are like oil and water, they don't go together. But when this all happens and that contrast is brought into relief, it can create a lot of grief. And I don't think there's anything to be done or should be done about experiencing that grief. You survived a grievous situation where instead of kindness and support and joining in on the fun, you were met with cruelty and contempt for trying to fully be yourself. That's a grievous situation, a sad one, a one that deserves whatever feelings come up when it's fully grasped. That grief in this type of scenario is what a very dear friend used to call clean pain, as opposed to dirty pain that can happen when we're in the process of avoiding such grief. Well, thanks for watching today's video. I hope it helps in your own process of recovering and enriching your life to include fun. And again, it's a process, and as the more compassion and patience you get to offer yourself along it, the better. Well, thank you for your continued engagement with the channel. I look forward to seeing you all again next Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Take care.